So, Pete, we know that over the years you would have had tremendous experience in terms of interviewing teachers
Hmm.
and deciding what their suitability is. I think the number of teachers that you would have processed, for want of a better term, um,
Process, yes.
that would be fairly high, and you would have some um, of your own criteria that you've applied in the past for someone who is going to be good enough to be online. If you were advising someone who
Mm.
wants to be an online teacher, who does have the potentials and all that sort of stuff, what would you advise them to do, or what would you advise them to avoid in an interview?
Okay, well, I think the important thing is actually it starts before the interview. When you're applying to online jobs, in
Yeah,
most cases, if you're applying to a company, then you're going to be filling in an online application form. And I think the first thing to say is, because I see this mistake is one of the most commonly made mistakes I ever see, is you really
yeah,
should only apply for jobs where you meet the stated criteria,
okay,
because you're going to get automatically rejected when you fill in a form and you don't check the right boxes compared to for what that company wants. You're going to automatically
yeah,
fail. So in these application forms, they're not looked at normally by a human being. Sometimes if you have a CV that you upload, then they'll read those. But
yeah,
actually, it's an automatic system that's checking for the right candidates. So if, for example, it says that the candidate has to have a degree, if you don't have
yeah,
a degree and you check the box says I don't have a degree, then your application is automatically going to fail, and you're going to be wasting time filling in the rest of the application. So that'd be my first
yeah,
thing: is really make sure you see the stated requirements and see what each company is looking for, and see if you match
yeah,
those, and only apply to those ones. Okay. So
okay,
once you've got past that, you're going to be asked to go to an interview, and usually, what will happen in that scenario is you're going to be asked to answer a few questions and give a bit of teaching practice. So it's usually quite a strange
just sorry,
situation.
Pete, sorry to interrupt. Before we get to that, what about sending in CVs, cover pages, all that sort of stuff? Are you saying that currently that's not a normal part of the application and interview process?
Yeah, most companies it's done by a form. So it's an online
Okay,
form that you fill in. Now, there are some companies that will ask for a CV, in which case you
yeah,
should make sure, again, that your CV matches those requirements, and that your CV
yeah,
is easy to read. And with a
yeah,
CV, you really only want to make sure that you've got the information that recruiter is looking for. So they're looking for your
uh-huh,
qualifications, your experience. It's often a good idea if you're teaching online to put your system, so how fast your internet speed is, what your webcam and headset is, that kind of thing. So they can see that you're a
yeah,
serious online teacher. But
yeah,
exclude all of the stuff that's not relevant. I think this is one of the important thing to remember is that each recruiter is going to look at your CV for 30 seconds, and in their head they have a checklist of their
yeah,
requirements. So your job when writing a
yeah,
CV is just to match those requirements. Don't put, I used to be a waiter in a restaurant many years ago now, but that's not relevant,
yeah,
and they don't need to see that, so that doesn't go on.
yeah.
Right? All my teaching
Okay,
experience from before does, and make sure that your qualifications are clearly highlighted. So your degree and your TESOL course is right there and obvious for that recruiter to see. Because I see so many teachers that don't even put their qualification on their CV, and they don't get jobs because they've missed off a key component there. Yeah.
oh, I see, I see. So that is some good advice on the application process. So give the company that's looking for teachers what they're looking for.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
don't apply if the information that you've
No.
got is not relevant.
No.
And then if
Exactly.
you're doing something like CV or cover letter, don't provide anything that's extraneous, and give them what they are actually looking for, which will be teaching experience and qualification. So,
Yeah. So one thing to add to
sorry.
that, I think, is also that, of course, a lot of teachers, if they're new and they've just qualified, don't have teaching experience. In which case, you
Yeah.
can start to think about things that are still relevant but aren't necessarily teaching. So, for example, if you've been
Okay.
a teaching assistant in a kindergarten, if you've done any kind of youth work or charity work, these kind of things, they all look great. Especially if you're going to be teaching with kids, they want to see that you have experience working with kids. Yeah, so that
Okay.
should definitely go on. Yeah.
Okay. Good. So let's just jump to the interview. Imagine that
Hmm.
you've been through the process and you are well, I'm not saying you, but there is someone who is about to be interviewed. What advice would you give them pre-interview and then for the during interview stage?
So the first thing is really read in detail the information that you get sent before the interview. So
Yeah,
you'll be emailed with, okay, this is how you get into the online classroom for the interview, depending on how they're going
yeah,
to manage that interview. And then they're going to tell you what their expectations are of how the interview is going to go and what they want to see. So think about
yeah,
that and say, okay, right, most interviews for these jobs are half an hour at most. Um,
yeah,
and they're quite on a tight schedule, so the interview will move through at quite a speed. So think about what you're going to say in your questions. Often they'll tell you what kind of questions they're going to ask you, so prepare an answer, right? And a lot of
yeah,
that's really going to be the basic questions are, why do you want to be a teacher? Why do you want to work online? Why do you want to, what's your teaching experience and background? And you should be
yeah,
able to say that pretty quickly and be prepared for that. The next part of most interviews is then what's called like a kind of assessed teaching practice, which is where the interviewer will often they'll pretend to be a child, which is quite a strange experience. So they'll take the role of the student and give you the role of the teacher, and you have to
yeah,
give them a short lesson. So what they'll do is they'll send you the material usually that they want you to teach before the class.
mm,
So
yeah,
treat it like any class, right? You're gonna write a lesson plan. You're gonna make sure that
yeah,
you've got any props or things that you want to use in that lesson. So flashcards.
yeah,
I use soft toys when I'm teaching, particularly if I'm going to do a dialogue. So
yeah,
bring all those things with you and have it all prepared and prepare it like a proper
yeah,
lesson. A really good tip is often, you don't want to. If you're going to be using flashcards, for example, you don't want to print all those out. Maybe you haven't got time. So I use a tablet and I put the flashcards on a little tablet and I use those as my teaching aids. So you can bring in
okay,
extra things. And I think the more you kind of prepare and the more you show that you're willing to go the extra mile and bring in extra materials and do that kind of thing, the better. And really good tips are things like if you're going to have a teaching background, put that company's logo in the background. They love to see their own logo, in an interview.
mm,
Um,
yeah,
sometimes they'll ask, sorry, they'll ask teachers to wear a certain color. So if the company's color is red, then wear a red t-shirt. And think about what that company is expecting to see from a teacher. So if you're teaching kids, then you'll obviously be wearing something quite informal. If you're going to be teaching a serious business class, then maybe it's the time to put on your shirt and jacket, but don't overdress for a kids interview. There'll be some key tips for that.
Okay. And what about response to feedback, if you get any?
Um,
Any
some
advice on that?
some companies will give you feedback and
Mm,
some won't.
mm,
I think if you've done a TESOL course, you'll probably start getting used to people critiquing your teaching. Um,
mm.
don't worry about that too much, just because they say, I think you could have tried this, you could have tried that. Rather than, try and engage that recruiter on why they're saying that. So, for example, if they say you should use more total physical response, you don't go, okay, thank you. You say, oh yeah, good idea. I could have done this point. In the future, if I were
I
doing it
see.
again, I would do that. And that shows that you're
Yeah.
willing to accept feedback and that kind of, yeah, kind of thing. Mhm.
Okay. So I think that's some fairly clear guidance, Pete, on the, but there's
One,
more.
there's one last key tip. And the key
Yeah,
tip is this: go into the
yeah,
classroom and prepare beforehand, but also make
yeah,
100% sure that you are on time and you attend the first interview. Um, Lots of teachers don't attend the interview. I think that's because most people get quite nervous before an interview.
yeah,
Even if you're nervous, still attend because you're probably most people will actually perform and pass when they attend. But
yeah,
if you cancel that interview, even if you give the best reason in the world, they may reschedule that interview, but that's a big flag for them that you're perhaps not reliable. So always make sure you attend the interview on time and you know how it's going to be and you're prepared.
Oh, I would second that very, very much. I think, yeah, I think that would be a major obstacle to engaging someone if they were late or didn't attend the the first interview. Okay, Pete. Well, thank you very much for your guidance and your information for novice online teachers, or indeed teachers who are online already and want to perhaps pick up a few more tips. But
Okay.
yeah, thank you very much for that, and I
Okay.
hope you enjoy the rest of your fine day. Yeah.
Thanks.